Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We've got a lively crowd here this morning at Columbia State Community College. I'm Dave Crouch. This is Policy Talks brought to you by the Williamson, Inc., our county chamber of commerce. And we look forward to having a lively discussion up here as well as in the back today. The audience is enjoying this sunshiny day, I guess, but Columbia State's a beautiful place to have a party, so let's have one today. We have a great audience here. We got our TV audience, courtesy of Creed Henderson and his WCTV crew, and Tom Lawrence has got us on WAKM radio, so we welcome all those folks listening in and watching from afar. We've got a distinguished panel this morning, minus one. We've got our state legislative delegation that represents the entire county, with the exception of Senator Joey Hensley. I knew it wasn't Joel, but Joey Hensley, who was unable to be here this morning. But Senator Jack Johnson here to my left, he is our representative in District 27. Also, our Senate Majority Leader in the state of Tennessee, and swinging a big stick up there on Capitol Hill and keeping everybody in line, I hear. Next to him, Todd Warner, representing the 92nd District from down on the southern end of our county in Marshall County. Next to him, Representative Gino Bulzo, District 61, I believe, Brentwood area, Northern Franklin. Senator. Representative Lee Reeves, just about promoted you there, Lee. And you're in District 65, and that's that's Franklin and West, Fairview, et cetera. And then Jake McCalman, representative from District 63, which covers pretty much the eastern part of the Williamson County, top to bottom. So glad to have you with us. Appreciate you taking the time to be here this morning. And we're going to skip around this morning. I usually try to have a train of thought, but I couldn't do it today. It's going to be a jumping from one thing to another. But Jack, the governor's amended budget came out yesterday, day before. And unfortunately, my source is your favorite source, the Tennessee, and I could not find anything on the state website about it. So I dug hard, but I was not successful there. But $343 million additional dollars, as I understand it. Some adjustments to the school funding. And tell us in essence what the amendments are all about, if you can.
Sure. Good morning, Dave. Good to be with you again. So yeah, this is our normal process. The governor presents his budget, which is the vast majority of all the funding of government early in session whenever he delivers the state of the state. But then he follows that up later in session with what we refer to as the AA, or the administration amendment, or the supplemental budget, whatever. And that contemplates additional revenue collections. We start our session and they start working on this budget in October for the following July 1 when that budget goes into effect. So it's a long, lengthy process. So the supplemental amendment contemplates more updated revenue collections because, as we've discussed numerous times here, our budget is based on forecasted revenues. And so we get many more months of the fiscal year that we're currently in to see if we are tracking with the budget numbers. And what's interesting about this particular fiscal year is we are pretty much on the nose with what we forecasted a year ago. And we try to come in at least on the nose or over-collect, meaning we're always very conservative with those forecasts because we don't want to find ourselves halfway through a fiscal year and say, oh no, we're only collecting 80% of what we forecasted, because we have a constitutional mandate to actually balance the budget. And if we're underwater, we have to go find cuts. We have to balance the books at the end of the year. So this year, we're pretty much on the nose. In fact, I think through February, we were within $30 million of our forecast. And that's in a $60 billion state budget. So that's pretty close to where we were. And so what that tells us is we were very conservative with our revenue forecast for this fiscal year, the 24-25 fiscal year, and we were appropriate to be very conservative because our revenues, they're not falling, but they are relatively flat. So with the supplemental amendment that we got, there were not a lot of significant changes from the budget that was proposed back in late January, early February, if that makes sense. But good news is we're still the best fiscally managed state in America. We're still the least indebted, the lowest tax state in America, and we're very close to hopefully getting ready to finally do our final negotiations between the Senate and the House on the governor's supplemental budget, and we're kind of down to just fine tuning some smaller things.
The items that caught my attention. And I think I understood this, but $40 million cut to the schools that had enrollment drops. Is that in Davidson, Shelby, and Hamilton County, where the what did we call them 3 years ago? Not vouchers, but
education savings accounts.
Yeah. And
no, let me correct that again. So what we did in those districts, those counties that were the Education Savings Account, not to be confused with Education Freedom Act that we passed this year, two totally different programs. In 2019, we passed the ESA program. For Davidson and Shelby counties, we later added Hamilton County at the request of their legislative delegation. That legislation included a hold harmless provision that we had set some money aside for. As we expected, there were no detrimental revenue impacts to those counties once the ESA program was implemented, but we had set aside some money in case there had been detrimental impact. There was none to those counties with implementation of that program. And so now that the hold harmless had a 3-year, I think, provision in it, and that has expired, there's been no detrimental impact to those districts, so we're pulling that money back.
Finds it much better than anything I have seen out there in the media, and appreciate that explanation. $3 million for the Tennessee Battlefield Preservation Fund. Is that earmarked for any particular battlefield, or will Williamson County see any of that?
If you don't mind, I'll take that.
Go ahead.
Because I have been working with the battleground organizations to secure those funds. And of course, that wasn't me that did it, but the governor and his staff allotted those funds. But I certainly lobbied for that very hard because we've got battlefields across Tennessee that drive income and revenue from visitors and has a massive economic benefit for our state. And of course, we've got some things here in Williamson that also drive those things. And in fact, later today at the Carter House, we are opening a new visitor center there. And we're doing that because of the number of people that come in, and so I'll be there helping to celebrate that. But I'm very happy to see in the AA that the governor and his team allotted funds towards that, and I'll be lobbying very hard to keep those funds in as we go and get into the budget process in the House.
A couple other things: $20 million for school safety, and another $20 million for charter school facilities. And while we're talking about the budget, are we seeing any impacts yet from the cuts going on in Washington, D.C.? Do we have any reading yet on how that will affect basically any of our citizens? Jack, are you aware of any?
No, we're watching very closely. Our Commissioner of Finance and Administration, who interestingly is my predecessor in the state Senate, Jim Bryson, a great friend, does a great job. Stephen Smith, who's the director of our TennCare, our Medicaid waiver program, watching that closely. I think you'll find that most of us are celebrating that they're doing this in Washington and trying to find that waste, fraud, and abuse. Right. We don't anticipate any cuts to significant programs that are working. And I think President Trump has been very clear. If something is working and the money is being spent in the way it was intended by Congress, which is what we do in Tennessee, if we get money from the federal government, we're going to spend it in the manner in which it was appropriated. So I'd have no underlying fear that we're going to see significant cuts. We have the best managed Medicaid program in the country. TennCare is what we call it. And so we're going to watch it. We're going to monitor it. But no, I do not fear any significant cuts. I think that our federal delegation, Senators Blackburn and Haggerty, our congressional representation, they're going to do a good job of advocating and demonstrating that Tennessee, Mr. Trump, Mr. Congress and President Trump, this money you're sending to us, we're spending it the way you want it, and we're spending it well. We're not wasting it. There's not fraud and abuse. And so I think they'll move on and go look at other states where there is significant waste, fraud, and abuse.
Any additional color there from the rest of our panel this morning? A couple weeks ago, there was a ruckus over at the Marriott, and best way I know to describe it. And quite honestly, it was a little unclear to me the differences between the two, but there were two groups, one that's pushing for a closed caucus, as I understand, a closed primary, and one for, I'm not sure. Now, Gina, I think you were partially involved in that. Can you explain the difference? What's going on and what we're trying to do, or what we're trying not to do?
I'm not sure that I can, Dave. It was an interesting affair to watch. I was there, and obviously I have friends in both camps that were in both different slates.
I should probably have set the table a little better. That was the Williamson County Republican Convention we're talking about. So it was the Republicans in Williamson County trying to make some decisions. So go ahead, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing affair because we had a total of 1,555 bona fide Williamson County Republican primary voters show up to elect a slate of new county election officials, not election officials, county party officials. And that's amazing just to think that we had so much interest that we could actually draw a crowd of that side. And it was really divided right down the middle between the two slates of clients, I'm playing lawyer today already, of candidates. And
he's got trial later on, folks.
The side that had Steve Hickey as chairman won narrowly over the side that had Brian Clifford as their candidate for party chairman. And most of the votes were a difference of between maybe 40 and 150, depending on whether it was the chairman's office or vice chair or secretary or treasurer. But my understanding of the principal difference between the two was that one side, the Brian Clifford side, was saying that they were opposed to electing officials using caucuses. And the side that Steve Hickey was on saying, we're not doing that anyway. We're going to close primaries. There's actually legislation that I'm a co-sponsor of running through the House and the Senate right now to actually require party registration so that we have just Republicans voting in Republican primaries and Democrats voting in Democratic primaries. And as far as the actual substance of the issues, Dave, that's the only one that I was able to sense there was a difference. I think on all of the core fundamental Republican values, the two sides were the same. But there seemed to be an issue about how we go about selecting candidates for, local and state offices. And ultimately, the voters decided that the Elevate slate was the one that should actually govern the county party for the next several years. And that's what happened.
Can I play the devil's advocate?
Sure.
What I usually do up here anyway. But Murray County had a similar, I think, effort several years ago that took over the county party there, and they decided to have a caucus instead of a primary. So is there anything prohibiting our newly elected party officers, if they remain there, that election's being challenged, I think, and but is there anything to keep them from calling for a caucus instead of a primary in the county?
I'd say yes, and that's just not something that I think anyone's in favor of doing. And first, with regard to the challenge, let me say that Debbie Deaver and her team did an amazing job of hosting that event. It was unbelievable that it was as organized and as well run as it was, and she deserves a lot of credit and has unfortunately received some, I think, unfair criticism over these allegations that have come about. But the fact is, Dave, that I think all of us want to have elections that include as many Republican primary voters as possible. The last thing we ever want to do is to disenfranchise anyone. The difficulty is in making sure that the folks who are showing up to vote are actually bona fide Republicans. And there may be some who think that we should have a caucus if it's legally appropriate to do so or even possible. But I think most of us think that the primary system is actually the more inclusive way of doing it, as long as we've got guarantees that we're going to have bona fide Republicans electing Republican primary candidates without Democrats crossing over to try to influence who the Republican Party selects as a candidate. And vice versa, of course, because it would be just as inappropriate for Republicans to cross over in the Democratic parties and do the same thing. So I don't have any fear that we're going to all of a sudden be electing officials in caucuses here in Williamson County. I believe we're going to go ahead and continue to use primary elections that are as broad as we can be while focused on bona fide Republican voters.
Be willing to add to your bill that require counties, let's say over 100,000 of population, to have a primary, or a bona fide primary, even if you have to register as a Republican instead of a caucus, though?
No, that bill is already sufficiently far in advance. It's been vetted by some of our subcommittees as well, that trying to tack on amendments at this late date is not something that I would be in favor of.
Todd Warner.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Columbia State and Williamson County, Inc. It's always great to be here and be amongst you. I couldn't do a better job explaining it than what Representative Bosso did. But I think at the end of the day, Dave, what we need to realize as Republicans is, I don't think whichever slate got elected, at the end of the day, I think they're going to do what their members want them to do. I think they'll vote and do at the end of the day what the members want. I don't think the slate that was elected, those 5 or 6 or whoever, are going to make the final decision. I think that it'll be up to the members of the Republican Party as to how they want to proceed. And one thing that was, I guess, the only time, well, let me say this: I didn't, being from Marshall County, I didn't get to vote. I was there, but it was something to see, and it was great to see that many Williamson County folks come out and be interested.
Jack, any comment?
No, I think that's been the one thing that I would add. This conversation about party registration, which I have always supported. I think some people have the notion that in itself is a means to disenfranchise people. I absolutely think 1,000% we should maintain our primary system for county offices, well, all offices. But what we're talking about here is the authority of the county party executive committee to make that decision. In fact, they have to affirmatively call for a primary for the May election, which we're talking about county mayor, sheriff, county commission, county clerk, the county offices. And that election is next year. We will have that primary in Williamson County, so we need to absolutely maintain our primary. I also am a co-sponsor of the other bill, or the bill rather, that calls for party registration. And that's just simply a declaration that if you're going to participate in a Republican primary, you need to affirmatively attest that you are a Republican. Today, under our current system, you do that when you show up at the polls. You do it when you pull the ballot. You attest at that time that you are a Republican. And that system is probably fine. I just think you should have to make that attestation 60 days or 30 days or 90 days before you're going to participate in a primary in order to prevent this crossover voting. And I'll give you a good example that happened right here in Williamson County, and I think it was in the 2018 cycle. Some of you may remember. We had a Democrat and a Republican primary for county commission. And the Democrats called for a primary. They sometimes don't call for a primary in Williamson County. But you had 2 candidates, not 1 but 2, that pulled petitions to run for county commission in Williamson County as a Democrat. And when it came time for the primary vote, those two candidates, Democratic candidates for county commission, voted in the Republican primary. They didn't even vote in their own primary where they were on the ballot, because they were trying to vote in the other party's primary to influence the outcome of who they would have to run against in the general. Now, is it widespread? Does it change outcomes? I don't know. I'll leave that to other people. But there's no problem with us having a system that says that at some time in advance of the election, I'm going to point out two different people who changed parties, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. These are two people who were Democrats, who at some point in their life woke up and said, you know what, I'm not a Democrat anymore. As Ronald Reagan said, the Democratic Party left me, I didn't leave them. We celebrate that as Republicans. We're all Republicans. We celebrate the fact that someone might decide they've been a Democrat all their life and they want to become a Republican. And we welcome them into the Republican Party. But if you're going to wake up and have that revelation, you ought to do it 60 days before you get to vote in one of our primaries. That's how I see party registration. I don't think it's a bad thing. So I support party registration. I do not in any way support, and I will fight tooth and nail to have any effort to hold a caucus for any of our elections. Now, and by the way, that would exclude death or resignation, special circumstances, obviously. But when it comes for that regularly scheduled primary that we hold in May for our local offices, that needs to be done by primary, not caucus.
Jake McCalman, how do you feel?
Morning, Dave.
Morning.
I'm going to echo the sentiments of my colleagues up here. I mean, I voted in favor of the party registration when it came before me in full committee. And, you know, with the same time, I am adamantly against electing officials in our local elections via caucus.
Reeves?
All right, all the panel. No, I'm exactly where some of my colleagues have stated that they are. You know, I am a co-sponsor on Representative Chris Todd's Bill 886 to allow for party registration. I think, and I echo the senator's sentiments on that. I think it puts us exactly where we, in some ways, ought to be, so that we are eliminating that crossover vote. And I agree. I don't know the extent to which that happens, although there are some prominent examples, and either in addition to what the senator mentioned or in place of, there were some candidates back in 2016 or 2018 that were school board candidates that did exactly that. On the other side, I don't believe that conventions or caucuses are an appropriate way for counties to hold primaries. I think that voter turnout is depressed as a result of that. I mean, we had at the Republican reorganization, we had a record number of people turn out for an event like that. It was over 1,500. But yet that pales in comparison to the number of people that turned out in the Republican primary for sheriff earlier this year. And I think it was 1,500 for the reorganization and maybe 26,000 for the sheriff. And so, you know, I don't think there's a lot of debate that would be damaging to our voters and their ability to participate. And for that reason, I'm glad that the whole panel agrees on that.
Anybody else?
Dave, if I may add, and I'm for what the party wants to do, and I'm a co-sponsor as well as these gentlemen on Representative Chris Todd's bill, and I hope we get it through. I talked to him on Thursday morning on the House floor, and Jack May can answer a little bit to this. That I think we're pretty close in the House. It hung up a little bit, maybe in the Senate. But before he answers, I would like to add, if the county chooses to go to a caucus, if you're part of the Republican Party, you still have a chance to vote. You just don't go on primary day. You can go to the meeting and vote. It's left strictly up to you're shaking your head. You can't go to the. Do what, ma'am?
I would argue with that.
Well,
You couldn't even come to the caucus the other night, he's out of town. So if you're out of town, you're
Well,
working, you're sick at home, you're a military person,
Let's save the audience participation till last, and we will certainly come back around and talk about that. So, all right. Moving on along. We've got some guests here that have a particular interest in a bill that Jake McCalman, I think, has got a heavy involvement in. Jake, would you like them to explain it, or would you like to explain it?
I would
Go for it.
ask what bill in particular. I'm carrying 16 bills this year, so can we be more specific?
Carolyn Evans with the Davis House is here. Stand up, Carolyn, so we can see you. But understand that there's bills involving child abuse that y'all are heavily involved in. Tell us, first of all, what Davis House does on a daily basis and how the state is involved in it and what you need.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning. Davis House Child Advocacy Center is the center where all sexual abuse allegations, all severe physical abuse allegations go directly to our center to be able to interview children in a child-friendly way and to be able to provide investigative and healing services for them. There's not other CACs in Williamson County, so it's our job to take care of Williamson County children. And one of the things that Representative McCalman has been wonderful to do is to bring a bill, because we do have some state funding. We're actually only 20% funded by the state. We're not a state agency, but we do those, the funding pieces that we do are reimbursement contracts. What's been happening is those contracts, we turn it in, we ask for reimbursement at about $20,000 a month, and they're late. Those payments are late. That's not from the state. It is from Department of Children's Services that is causing those to be late for whatever reason. And so Representative McCalman has put together a bill that requires that to be reimbursed to us within 30 days. And there's also a 10% penalty if they're not reimbursed within that 30-day amount. Right now it's at 45 days. We were waiting 60, 90, 100. There were several months, several CACs, not just Davis House, but very appreciative of someone who is willing to take that to the big group in the state to be able to say, we really need to have this attended to. The other thing that is also in place is that child advocacy centers in Tennessee have not had any increase in state funding since 1996. And so right now, we are only getting $35,000 a year for a forensic interviewer. This is a trained person to be able to ask our children questions in a developmentally appropriate way. The other amount is $52,000 a year for our child advocacy centers just to run. And so that's what we're asking as far as another bill. You'll have to tell me which number it is, but that it's by every time Department of Children's Services budget increases, then child advocacy center budgets would increase by 75%.
Representative McCallan, give us an update on those bills and anything else in that area.
Sure. So the first bill that was mentioned is House Bill 46. That is actually, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this one, but that one we've hit a snag on it because it's unfairly targeting one department. So I'm going to put this out there. I'm going to have a lot of friends in the governor's office next year, I'm sure. So what this bill is ultimately going to do is going to be broad sweeping and reduce the statutorily mandated 45 days to 30 days for all departments and reimbursements. Interestingly enough, it's already in code that they have to be paying a 1.5% late penalty on those late payments. So I don't believe that has happened yet, but that is in code as well already. So it's something that it got hung up this year. We're going to take another look at it next year and come back and with a broader sweeping bill. With regards to the other bill, I'm trying to find out. I'm a co-sponsor on it. I should know the number, but I don't off the top of my head. It's carried by Michelle Carringer, and it is trying to obtain more funding for the contracts. The keep the lights on amounts that haven't been adjusted for almost 30 years now. So that has passed through on the House. I don't know where it's at in the Senate, but I'm fingers crossed on that one as well. But absolutely need to be supporting our CACs.
Jumping back to the Education Scholarship Act, the governor or the state put out a list of schools that have applied for those scholarships. And just as a consumer, does the schools have to apply to participate, and then the families have to apply for the scholarships as well? Is that the way it works, Jack?
Close. No, the schools, in order to receive the scholarship, just have to meet the criteria. And I think the Department of Education did send out an alert asking for schools to that would otherwise be qualified. You have to be a Category 1, 2, or 3 private school to let them know. And at last report, almost immediately, over half of the private schools in Tennessee said that they would happily accept the scholarships, and of course that will continue to grow. From a consumer standpoint, we tailored this specifically to make sure that if you're a family and you're interested in applying for one of these scholarships, you can do it either way. You can first apply to the state for the scholarship and secure a spot for the scholarship, and then go find an appropriate private school for your child. Or you can apply at a private school and be accepted and then go apply for the scholarship. So either way is fine. And obviously there'll be some, they do the first step and then the second step doesn't happen. And of course that scholarship would revert. So wanted to make it as user-friendly as we possibly could.
Dave, if I might, just on that last issue, it's House Bill 641 by Carringer. It's passed all the way through. It went behind the budget and finance sub. So we're just at this point essentially waiting on funding. So.
Bill that's been in the media, barring children of undocumented immigrants from our public schools. And
the bill doesn't do that, Dave. I'm sorry to say.
That's why we're here. So
it doesn't do that.
Correct the media coverage
it
where
doesn't
necessary.
do that. And I don't mean to put him on the spot, but my friend Representative Bolso has given probably the most effective. So I'm going to ask him. He was also in committee the other day to explain what the bill actually does. But it doesn't do what you just said. So I'll yield to Representative Bolso.
Thank goodness.
And for the record, Dave, I've never met somebody who doesn't think that every child should be educated. I mean, that would be a very unusual position for anybody to take, although you are correct. That is the way the media portrays the bills that are passing through the Tennessee General Assembly. But this all starts with Texas in 1975, because Texas in 1975 was being inundated with illegal aliens coming across the border from Mexico. And the Texas legislature enacted a law that gave local education associations and school districts the ability, if they wanted, to charge tuition to cover the costs that they were being charged, or that they were incurring because of the influx of illegal aliens coming across the border. So the law gets challenged. It goes up, and in 1982, the Supreme Court decides this case called Plyler versus Doe. And that's really the key to this whole debate. In Plyler versus Doe, this is going to strike you as odd, Dave, but we had a Supreme Court, a majority opinion written by Justice Brennan, 5-4 decision, say that any parent anywhere in the world can enter our country illegally, and they have the right under the Equal Protection Clause to enroll their children in any school district in the United States to obtain a free education. Now, those of us who actually understand the Equal Protection Clause and when it was passed in 1868 and what it means, we're just dumbfounded by that decision. It's never been challenged because, for whatever reason, it's never gotten to the point where it is now. It's not just Texas, but it's the entire country that is struggling with the effects of educating students who have English as a second language or English that they're English language learners. And so what we're doing is we are attempting to pass a bill very similar to what Texas did in 1975 that gives school districts the option, if they want to charge tuition to those children whose parents are in the country illegally. And the whole idea is that it's going to be an attack on Plyler versus Doe. The case or once the statute is passed, if it's passed, is immediately going to be enjoined because it does conflict with the Supreme Court's holding in Plyler versus Doe. That process is going to take a couple of years, and no child is going to be charged tuition or removed from any school while the case is on appeal. And our hope is that during the time that the case is winding its way through the courts, that we will aggressively address the problem we've got with illegal immigration across the entire country. And for your listeners, if they really want to get a good handle on this, go back and read Chief Justice Warren Burger's dissenting opinion in Plyler versus Doe. As I mentioned, it was a 5-4 decision, and he goes through and just completely demolishes the alleged argument that the majority had used under the Equal Protection Clause to reach its holding. It's the kind of an application, Dave, that the Supreme Court has never before attempted before 1982, and they never have since, because typically to strike down a law under the Equal Protection Clause, you have to be dealing with a suspect class. Illegal aliens are not a suspect class. And you have to be dealing with something that's called a fundamental right under the Constitution. Education is not and never has been considered a fundamental right under the U.S. Constitution. So the Supreme Court, in a very result-oriented case, just said all school districts across the country are obligated to provide a free education for anyone who's in the country illegally. And that's what we're doing in the Tennessee General Assembly. We are leading to try to reverse that precedent, get the law right. At the same time, we want to go ahead and make sure all students, obviously, are properly educated where they should be.
We're going to have a test on this before we leave, so
Jack tried to tell you.
we're getting short on time, so any comments, if you would, keep them brief. Go ahead.
One thing I'd like to point out, and it's hard to follow Representative Bosso anytime he speaks. But I have a teacher down in Marshall County that teaches, and I can't remember if it's in Smyrna or Antioch, that has 25 students in her class, and only 3 of them speak in English. And we're talking about a 3rd or 4th grade class here, and the question becomes, how are these teachers supposed to teach when they can't speak the languages, and they have to have assistants come in and help them communicate with these kids? And it adds to our problem where, when we go to figuring out how many kids we got reading on grade level, I mean, it's a problem that continues to cause us problems. But they both said it well. It leaves it up to the locals to determine what they want to do.
On that, moving on along, while you've got the floor here, Todd, I had somehow missed that the Henry Horton Park was going to get a brand new 78-room lodge built. And give us an update on that. I just saw that literally within the last few days.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank Governor Lee. It was put in the budget, I think, maybe 2 years ago, and they in the process of whatever it takes to go through the building commission, and I think they're ready to break ground. Bids are going out right now. It's my understanding that Bell Construction has the contract to build the new lodge. They're going to leave the old existing lodge up and build the new lodge, then tear the old one down. It's full of asbestos and that type of stuff. It's my understanding. But one thing that I've gotten a little pushback on, and Senator Hensley down there, is there's Henry Horton State Park, the swimming pool, that's been there for 60-something years, I think. It's going away, and the hometown folks are a little aggravated with that, but we're hoping down the road that maybe we can get a pool put back in there to replace that one. But we're very thankful for that, and construction is about to start.
Oh, a lot of people in this area enjoy Henry Horton from time to time. And
one quick thing I may add, I think that park, and I stand to be corrected, may be the most visited in the state. Fall Creek Falls, I think, falls in second right behind it.
Area. And along the same line, the governor just appointed a Duck River Watershed Planning Partnership Board to look at issues down around the Duck River regarding water supply and I guess environmental issues. Are any of you all intimately familiar with what's going on there? Is there an agenda there, or is that just a follow-up to something else? Jack?
Yeah, so the governor's recommended or proposed in the budget $100 million to kind of be seed money. And I can't use the word intimately. I can't do intimately, but I can discuss it at a high level. We have a water problem in that issue, Murray County and some of the surrounding areas, because their primary water source is the Duck River. And if you don't know, you should know that the Duck River is the most biologically diverse river in North America. It is truly a gem. It is a beautiful river and needs to be protected. And that general area down there south of us, the primary water source is the Duck River, and that is unsustainable long term. We know that the growth down there is tremendous, and a lot of folks moving in down there. So we have to find a long-term solution. And I think one of the solutions, I'm not going to say it is but is to build a pipeline from the Cumberland River to provide water for that area for the next 50 years. That is going to be a very expensive project. I believe there are already existing easements that are TVA easements, so luckily you wouldn't have to worry about eminent domain and finding property for most of it, so there's a path, but still just getting that pipeline built. I've heard it could be as much as $1 billion for that project. The state's not going to pay $1 billion for that, but the utilities down there, and obviously the ratepayers down there, are going to have to decide how they want to proceed, and the state wants to be a cooperative partner, so we set aside $100 million for that project to be some seed money. Maybe it wouldn't be quite that expensive, but something's going to have to be done.
Rick Williams, Marcia Blackburn's field rep here. Have you got anything to add to that?
Andy Ogles.
I'm sorry, golly, Andy Ogles. I'm sorry. I'm getting my.
Andy Ogles running for governor?
You never know. you never know. You never know. I know Congressman Ogles has interest down there. What's your knowledge of anything going on, Rick?
My knowledge is there's a citizens group forming down there called Columbia Dam Now, and it's got county commissioners and leaders in the community. I'm aware of it. It's called Columbia Dam Now. They want to build the Columbia Dam that was built in the 70s, torn down by a federal judge's order, and it's a citizens group. Several county commissioners are leading it. I'm not speaking for them. I'm just giving the knowledge I know of what they're doing. I mean, I was earlier this morning, I was at the Farm City breakfast, and some of them there were promoting that idea. It's an annual breakfast in Columbia. Starts at 6:45. It's rough to get there. So that's why I was late getting here, but that's all that's been done so far that I know of. But they're adamant to try to work with TVA and actually build the dam that was built that got torn down.
I'm still mad about that, but I remember going out there when I was in college and seeing this big $90 million dam that was finished practically and got torn down. So given the change in the political climate in Washington and other places, I made a phone call to a representative that represents the area where my farm is down there and said, why don't y'all get that going again? He said, we already are. So it would be interesting, though, to have a lake the size of Percy Priest down there that TWRA is now in possession of that land, but I understand TVA gave it to them with the option to pull it back if they ever wanted to restart that. So stay tuned. We're going to open it up for questions. Well, one other thing I do want to get an update on before we open it up for questions is the real estate transfer tax. Do we have an update on where that stands and what the prognosis there is?
So we've had some great conversations about that. This is, I guess, to set the stage, something that our mayor, Rogers Anderson, and other mayors have come to us wanting us to revisit. When there are real estate transactions, there's a transfer tax. Back pre-income tax debate days, I think that half of that revenue came back to local governments because obviously the real estate transaction is taking place at the local level. This is one of the things that was one of the things taken back from local governments in order to get the budget balance when they were trying to pass the state income tax. Many of us believe, and I'm the sponsor of the legislation to do this, that we need to get half of that tax back to the local, to the county level. Problem is, it's about $160 million fiscal note to the state recurring. That's a very, very big price tag. So I don't believe we're going to get that done this year. I already talked about the revenue situation, but the good news is, and when you're dealing with something of that magnitude, it is important to have that conversation and to educate members. I had to get educated on how this used to work, and I think it is the right thing to do for half of that money to come back to counties. For Williamson County, I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the teens, I think, of millions of dollars, which is significant. So I've got the bill filed in the Senate. I can't remember who my House sponsor is, but
Speaker Marsh.
Pat Marsh, thank you. So remember, we're in the first session of the 114th General Assembly. Any bill that is not acted upon this session is still alive for next session. So we're going to continue to talk about that. Again, I don't think we're going to get it done this year, but that doesn't mean we haven't made good progress on advancing the football.
Okay. I'm going to ask another guest here for an update on transportation issues. Ken Starwalt, President of the Tennessee Home Builders. Stand up, Ken.
Road builders.
Yeah, road builders, not home builders.
That's correct.
Like I said, this is all about correcting
you
me.
need one before you have the other, actually. So funding, in the governor's budget that he released in February, he had $1 billion transfer out of the general fund into the road fund, a one-time allocation. And then there's also legislation that looks at transferring sales tax on tires from the general fund to the road fund of about $80 million. And that bill is currently sitting in both finance committees as they talk about the budget, and it's actually behind the budget. But as it's been since it's in the governor's budget, we presume it'll be funded in that regard. So the gentleman seated to your left may have a better answer with regard to the status of that.
Senator Johnson, I think you had a little bit to do with that extra $1 billion that got put in the budget for road construction.
Yeah, very, very important, and I'm optimistic that will remain. That's what the governor proposed. Again, I know we're short on time, but it's very important for this community, roads and road congestion. We've got a backlog of about $38 billion in road projects across the state. We generate about, $700 or so million from the gas tax to pay for those. That's not going to get the job done. So 2 years ago, we put $3 billion into the road fund. That's a one-time injection. We didn't raise taxes. We didn't borrow it. That was a cash injection. Governor's proposing another $1 billion into the road fund this year to help clear up some of that backlog of projects, and also the $80 million that Kent mentioned from the tire tax. That is recurring, so that's different. We talk about recurring, non-recurring revenue sources. That $80 million a year will be added to that, roughly $700, and help us. It's just something we're going to have to continue to do to get our road projects done.
Alderman Bev Berger raised her hand before the show started. So I've got a question.
I'm sorry.
Enthusiasm.
Two quick things. Real estate infrastructure district, we did that last year for residential, this year for commercial. And basically it's adding the ability of commercial development to be eligible for funding infrastructure for direct options. So I think that's going to go through. Isn't that true, Jack?
What was the second?
The infrastructure, Rita, the bill, the one that you signed on to.
Oh, yeah. For the, yes, that I feel.
Senate Bill
optimistic
26, House Bill 636.
Yes,
And
I
then
think that those are,
You think that's okay?
on track.
Okay, the only last one, it sent us a summer study, which I was not happy to hear. It's Senate Bill 327 and House Bill 319. It's important to our cities because those who choose to rent or have to rent, it is trying to basically, thank you. That bill is preemptive. It would maintain the present status of single-family residential property used or held for dwelling purposes containing not more than one unit to stay classified as residential. In other words, We do not want to tax our residential rentals as commercial. What that does, it takes that money back and it charges the people renting. And we have a lot of people in our community that have rentals that cannot afford to do that. And so that's important. It's gone to summer study. I'd like for us to look into that.
Commercial properties taxed at 40% of assessed value versus 25% for residential. So a little bit of a bump in fees there. Anybody else have any, got a couple here. Yes, ma'am. Stand up. Introduce yourself.
I am Dorinda Smith. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I can't
That's
keep
okay.
everybody's names.
My question is on the wetlands bill. I don't know if anybody really is very familiar with it. I'm concerned about that bill generally as that we would destroy our wetlands and the impact it might have to flooding. But more specifically to me is that I have wetlands on my property that are shared with the county property. And if the county decides to put an office building and pave over their share of the wetlands, what impact that would have on me? And if the bill anticipates any recourse I might have as a landowner that is impacted by their action.
Yeah, this is something that came out of West Tennessee, and I'm looking in the crowd to see if there's someone that knows about it, because there have been a lot of discussions about that, and I'm sorry, I don't know the details of that legislation.
Kent says he's done a
Ken's
little
coming to the
research
rescue.
on that.
Thank you, Ken.
I'll try to do my best. So the bills are dealing with isolated wetlands, and actually, even with the bill passes, Tennessee will still be the most regulated wetlands. We'll have the most strict wetlands regulations in the South. Right. So even if we're trying to deal with isolated wetlands, and what we're talking about is artificial wetlands, stuff that's created by tractor tires, right? And then we're talking about putting the wetlands in a low, moderate, and high quality. And if it's a low quality wetland, basically under quarter acre, half acre, you wouldn't have to do any mitigation. And as those wetlands get in higher quality, then you have to get a general permit or do mitigation. And if it's a high quality isolated wetland, nothing changes. You continue to have the same regulations we do now. So we're just trying to put some common sense into those regulations that deals with. We're talking about those wetlands, again, that are isolated. There's no direct flow to a waters of the state. And again, we also have to understand too is that the state does not regulate flooding. So they keep talking about how this is flooding. We do not regulate flooding. We regulate the water that's there. And so we're just trying to make it common sense so that we can develop properties that people, again, it's a property rights issue, that if somebody wants to be able to do something with their property, that they can actually develop it and do what they can.
I'd simply say that you can be sure that I will do everything that I can to protect our naturally created wetlands across the entire state. If we're dealing with something that is man-made by a large tractor trailer tire, that's a different issue entirely. We have to be reasonable about it. But I think protecting our environment is among one of our highest obligations in the Tennessee General Assembly, because we have to maintain Tennessee for future generations. And I'm happy to say that, I've worked closely with the Harpeth Conservancy in particular to work with them on making sure that we protect our environment across the state, and particularly the waterways.
Tom Lawrence.
Just an observation, gentlemen. I used to be a Democrat. I'm sure as hell not a Republican, okay? No offense.
Of course not.
I have never crossed over and voted in a Republican primary. I've been tempted, but I have not, because it's a matter of character. But I do, and you can't participate in politics in this county and not support a Republican. I think I've given some of y'all some money. And that's the key. This is how I participate in the Republican primary. I cut checks, and I've never gotten one to come back to me. That's how I participate. That's more valuable than one single vote anyway. One more observation. This guy from Chapel Hill just tickles me. He's a good representative. He had this bill naming B&A Trump. I don't know where that went, but
That's the Nashville airport.
But I think that has met with the overwhelming presence of one Williamson County, Dolly Parton. And I encourage everyone to sign that petition.
May I respond? Yeah, that bill went down in flames in the Transportation Committee.
Sorry, Todd.
Yeah, I had numerous emails asking to name it, and I would have no problem with that whatsoever. Before I ran that bill, I asked 100 people, could they tell me what B&A stood for? Two that could tell me. And one thought it was named after Megan Barry, but it was actually named after a colonel in World War, I think he won, and but yeah, it got shot down, and well, maybe we try Dolly Parton.
Dr. Darrell Lampley, stand up, please. Dr. Lampley has been our most gracious host with the help of the lady to his right here, Mary Beth Shalley, and Bob, and I don't know who else around here makes this such a nice venue for what we do every month. But Dr. Lampley, this is his last policy talk and his last day at the Franklin campus. Now, you're going to do some volunteer work or something at the main campus later on, but you're not going to be here anymore.
I will not be here anymore.
And you're going to spend a lot of time on the farm.
On the farm and in East Tennessee, the big city of Sunbright. We're building a cabin up there.
Okay. So we just want to say a huge thank you to the hospitality you've shown us here. You've been a good friend, and we're going to miss you. And just want to have everybody give you a big hand. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great group.
That's great. Thank you for letting us. Got just another minute. Dr. Jason, not Dr. Jason Golden, our county school superintendent. Any words of instruction to the panel we have up here today, Jason?
I don't have any words of instruction, but one thing that struck me when the early discussion of school funding came up, Senator Johnson told the school board about 3-4 months ago that he was going to work to find some funding to mitigate what we call the fiscal capacity indicator that reduces the amount of funding Williamson County gets compared to the rest of the state. He did that, so I want to thank him for that. That's offset some of that, so we very much appreciate it.
Kudos, Jack Johnson. We appreciate all the folks that show up here and make the atmosphere more lively. Got a great crowd here this morning. It takes, believe it or not, a lot of people. They think I just get up here and it happens, but it doesn't. Of course, Columbia State rolling out the red carpet and making sure we've got all the chairs and microphones and things that we need. Creed Henderson and his crew from WCTV are here. I don't know. I've never beat them here yet. So very early in the morning, get out here with the cameras and sound equipment and get it connected back to headquarters and make sure we go on the air there. Creed, we appreciate your help there. Tom Lawrence, make sure we get back to the radio station and get out over WAKM at the same time. Tom, we appreciate your help, and Tommy and all, and Linda and everyone there. Derby Jones, appreciate the help getting the word out with Williamson Herald. He's our media partner there, and that is very helpful in just letting the community know that this is available. We do have financial support from the Vanderbilt University. Our friend is Brady Cannon. Brady, are you here today? I don't see you. There he is back there. I gotta change that on my notes. Vanderbilt Medical Center, there is a difference now. And Brady, we appreciate your help there. AT&T, Laurie Deathridge. Is Laurie here today? I want to meet her sometime. So but we appreciate their help. And probably the most important person here, and I see her back there on the back row, Terry Wimke with the Lion Leadership Group. Make sure there's coffee here from McDonald's every Friday morning when we meet here.
Thank you, Terry.
And she's very reliable. The chamber staff, of course, Matt's the head honcho there, and Kel McDowell is the quarterback on this effort. Appreciate Jenna Potter and the PR she does. And so it just takes a village, and we appreciate all the help. Just want everybody to thank the ones involved to help make this happen. Next show, I believe, is April 25th. Look forward to having a legislative update. Are we going to have the wrap-up show that day, or is the session going to be over with by then?
That is the plan.
Fingers crossed, Tom.
Stay tuned.
Dave.
Look forward to seeing you next time.